The next position property that I want to talk about is the position absolute. So this position property is almost similar with the fixed position, but the only difference is that it is relative to the nearest positioned ancestor instead of the viewport. Let's try to go and apply that position property here in our box child 3, position absolute, and save this. Let's see what will happen to our child 3 element here. You would see that same with the fixed position, it is now out of its normal document flow, and the child 4 element that we have here occupied the space. That's why it's missing now here, because we have this child 3 position absolute out of the document flow. Now let's go and try to give it a value of top property 0 pixel, similar with the position fix child element that we have here. Let's see what will happen. You would see that the child 4 is actually behind the child 3, occupying the space of the child 3 here. The child 4 is occupying the space of the child 3. Because similar with the fixed position property, it doesn't leave a space, unlike the relative position that we have here for the child 1. Right now, we have declared the absolute positioned element and has no positioned ancestors. So that means that it will be positioning itself based from the document body or the root element itself, the HTML element. So right now, we have 0 pixels from the document body. Just remember that the absolute position declaration property will be completely removing the element from the regular flow, and the other element will be rendered as if that element doesn't exist at all, as we can see here right now. It's almost the same with the child 1 element here, from where we can position it using the top, right, bottom, left properties. But the only difference is that it's totally removed from the document normal flow. In child 1, we can see that it's relatively positioned, and it still occupies the gap here. And that's the difference between relative position and absolute position. This will be totally removed from the document flow. On the other hand, when it comes to the child 2 here that has a fixed position, it is different from the fixed position in a way that this can be related to a parent container. Unlike this child element, it will be fixed to the viewport. And once we scroll the fixed position element or the div element that has a fixed position, you will see that it scrolls together with the viewport, unlike the absolute position here. Just remember that the absolute position will be positioning itself inside of some parent element that it can reference. Here in our example, it is positioned inside of a parent element. However, our parent element is currently doesn't have any position value, and it has a value of static, which means it cannot have anything else positioned relatively or absolutely to it. This means we need to declare a position value here inside of the parent container, so that the child 3 element that has a position absolute declared inside of it will be referencing it as its parent container, from where we can go and position the child 3 element inside of it. Just remember that when we say positioned element, that is one whose position is anything except static. So right now we have the parent container, and the best way to actually go and relate this to absolute positioning will always be to have the position value to relative. And if we try to go and see what will happen here if we refresh this, right now the child 3 element is referencing the parent container because it is relative to the parent container. We can now see that this is relative to the parent container, and even if we go and change this to other positioning values, let's see what will happen here. You would see that the child 3 element here is still positioned to its parent container. Okay, but again, we don't do this commonly, guys. We usually combine the relative and the absolute position values here for us to be able to position a child element to its parent container. So just remember, we will need to use any of the other positioned elements declaration of either absolute, relative, sticky, or fixed in order to make this element that has an absolutely positioned value for its position property to work, we will need it to be relative to a certain positioned element, which can be absolute, relative, sticky, or fixed. So I'm hoping you're getting the idea here. And just remember, if we did not declare any declaration to our parent container here, as I've said, it will be related to the root element or the body of the document. The most common use case of the position absolute and relative positioning will always be in the parent container, we use the position relative, and in the child element, we use the absolute positioning.